the last time we spoke about obviously like from where we were at Cryo, having the gym, and then when COVID hit, everything kind of shut down and trying to make a plan after that. But since then, it's been actually really, really good. Moving everything online and moving everything kind of digitally has been good. I do see a lot of my clients, I was going to say patients, but I see a lot of my clients face to face. So like, again, my morning clients, and then I shoot out and I see them out in person. And especially with the style of training that we're doing, that functional approach to training, and more kind of, I don't want to say holistic, that's quite a broad term, but given like the movement specific, non-machine based type of training, it's tied in perfectly. So with the whole lockdown, you know, everything that I was saying to my clients beforehand, everything we were kind of preaching in the past, you know, what if there's a big apocalyptic event and we have no gyms and we have no machines and we have all the stuff? You know, first of all, where are you going to train? What are you going to train with? And what physical abilities will you have had developed? You know, is it going to be that big bodybuilding size, which is fine, but is it relative to, you know, functioning in the world and excuse me, and being dynamic and running around and pulling your weight and pushing your weight and climbing trees and running from zombies, so to speak, and a bit extreme. But
it's not too far off at this point, to be honest.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. I think, you know, hey.
No, I'm saying we had a couple of issues where we obviously had the riots a couple of months back. And you know what, it's just a small glimmer of an example of what could possibly happen. I know it's not like a doomsday prepping type of thing, but if it happened once, it could possibly happen again. And how prepared are you for things like that if they happen on a giant scale, which isn't out the realms of possibility, you know? So it pays to be prepared physically in a certain manner. And I think the approach that we're doing lends itself perfectly to apocalyptic apocalypse type of world that we hopefully won't live in. Yeah. Better be prepared and what's it? Rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. You know, the ability to kind of be that way, physical. And otherwise.
Yeah. But I quite like that though, because I was reading about like just around the quality of clinician, the quality of physician. And I think something that like really struck out for me was, are your patients best prepared for, you know, whatever you treat? So let's use back pain, for instance. For me, it's like, if your patient gets back pain or, you know, has a bout at 2 o'clock in the morning, have you best prepared them to do what they can at home, you know? And it's like, okay, well, so I need to get some heat and I need to do this, or I need to get some ice, I need to rest, I need to, you know, whatever it is like, I think, how best can we empower our patients, you know, to be able to deal with this stuff themselves. So I mean, it's quite interesting, but I like this how do we say this? Post-apocalyptic.
It's quite like a dark vision of the future, and let's hope it's not going to go there. But again, you know, just the old Boy Scout to me is like, you know, always be prepared. What's that saying? Always be prepared.
I love that.
It's interesting what you're saying. Like in both of our professions, yours being very clinical and quite on the doctoral side of things, and myself just being, come, let's just go and lift heavy things, or let's just go run fast, you know. So mine's more like the hammer approach, and you've got more like the scalpel approach, if you know what I mean. And together they work well. So even for yourself to have patients where, okay, I'm going to treat you now, but if you are by yourself, as you said, this is what you can do to kind of aid yourself, you know, over and above what we do. This is what you can do. And I enjoy doing the same thing too, you know, like with my clients. So on those alternating days, what we do here, I want you to do X, you know, and then this allows you to kind of think beyond the box. So I've always wanted my clients to become, in and of themselves, mini trainers. So if they are out somewhere and they have the routines that I send them on the alternating days, or they have a bit of a break for me, or, you know, for whatever reason, they are able to think, okay, well, the style of training was this, you know, and how can I think like a trainer, even though they're just, you know, people that aren't in the industry, but they just want to physically be strong. How can they themselves take all the ingredients that are lying around them and create their own recipes with the knowledge that they gain from a bit of time with me or a bit of time with you, and that's invaluable. You know, I think that's really important. So
yeah, I agree with you completely. I think the other thing that's important there is the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, you know, because I guess from my thinking and the type of approach I like to take is that biopsychosocial, and I think we spoke about this the last time, right? It's like, so you've got the biological aspect of things. So you're looking at, you know, metabolism, and you're looking at how well are your cells functioning, and, you know, maybe we can throw in posture into that, and we can throw in facets of joints and muscle strength and psycho, which is really the psychology behind healing, right? And just how important that is. And then social, which is also really important, because a lot of people, the social environment, and probably the last 2 years, you know, socially has been hectic, right? A lot of isolation,
big time.
A lot of, you know, just stress. People, and what's interesting is just like the idea that our brains don't know how to separate between, you know, social stress, psychological stress, and physical stress. So I guess it's interesting because you always talk about like making sure your patients are functional so they can run away from zombies. And it's like, well, so in this case, it's like sometimes the zombies come in form of like our social environment. And
of course, I love that. Yeah. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for different scenarios. Insert whatever threat it is. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think we might be going into branding. I think we might have a zombie in the corner of our Zoom calls.
I'll add little annotations, like little GIFs popping across the screen.
Yeah, that would be great.
Like this one right here. I'm going to pretend that I'm pointing at something.
I see it.
Shut your eyes and you're there. Have you noticed any major change in the kind of, when patients come to see you since COVID, for example, and the lockdown and these stresses that you mentioned? Have you noticed anything new popping up in the industry, like any new type of ailment that is like kind of reoccurring, something that was minor in the past, but since COVID has become a majority? Like, for example, lower back pain was a majority thing. Now you're going to get more shoulders, or some area of concern that COVID has pushed to the forefront that needs your kind of chiropractic attention? Or is it pretty much the same type of treatment, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is, right, because oftentimes when you do have, you know, whether it was the flu or COVID, most people did complain about things like back pain, neck pain, you know, musculoskeletal pain. But what was also interesting is just a lot of like chest issues, because people are coughing so much, and then you've got musculoskeletals around that area. So that was something that was very interesting, kind of having to work through that. So I think I definitely adjusted a lot more like posterior ribs this last 2 years than most. And just because what tends to happen there is that, you know, because of the joints between your spine, and try and make this as simple as possible, but between your spine and your rib, there's a joint there, right? And so with a lot of coughing, you get muscle spasms, and you tend to get that joint kind of, we don't talk about bone out of place at least my philosophy around chiropractic isn't necessarily bone out of place, but it's that it's stuck in its range of motion. And then you've got inflammation in that area, and then muscle spasms. And so, because it kind of goes back to the idea that your body's trying to protect itself, right? So, you know, in that case, your muscle spasms tend to be a muscle protection situation in that case. So a lot of healing, a lot of adjusting posterior ribs, getting patients to stretch again. So that from a musculoskeletal perspective was something that was popping up. I think the other thing is headaches. I'm seeing a lot of people with tension headaches, and oftentimes tension headaches tend to, so that's like your tight band around your head coming from your shoulders. And from a, you know, so we can look at it from that. I explain it to my patients as, you know, your fight or flight mode is shoulders up, you know, rounded, ready for battle or ready for a run. So because of that, you've got a lot of tightness in your shoulders, and then myofascial trigger points, which are your knots, form in that area, and then just kind of cause the referral headache. And then also what's interesting is that also tends to coincide with what we call cervicogenic headaches. So then that's something that is happening because the facets in the neck are not actually moving as well, and there's inflammation. And then, you know, and most people aren't moving their necks properly. Everyone's in flexion. So something I've been talking a lot about, I guess, with the whole Fix My Posture series, was really just our bodies are dynamic. So it's not to say that like perfect posture is you being rigid in one position. You know, too much moderation isn't moderation, right? So it's the same concept of like being able to move the neck into extension or so I think from that point of going, okay, so there's that fight or flight mode, but then also just psychologically and even from an energetic perspective, and, you know, kind of depending on, and I guess, you know, you would know, talking to clients, engaging how comfortable they are with different types of information, but we also know things like the body keeps score. So whether it's stress or, you know, the body is going to hold on to these negative energy, you know, kind of in certain points, whether it's trauma or stress, and stress tends to be held up in this region and then into the neck and into the head. So that, I think, from a musculoskeletal point, headaches and chest pain has been something I've been seeing a lot of during COVID. And then fatigue.
Really?
Which is interesting, So, I mean, and I feel like you probably, what do you see?
Very much alike, very like, for the sounds of it for yourself, it's like above the navel type things, which is all, you know, adrenal fatigue when you're looking at your thyroids and the tension and that posture and all those type of things. A lot of my guys, I think more on the physical side of things, what they start lacking is, I think what it is, you know, a lot of people think, well, I'm working from home, I've got all this free time, but I think they're working harder now than they ever have, you know, because not only are they sitting at home and working, from the moment they get up, they can sit behind their desk and start working. Whereas before they had to shower, make breakfast, travel around, then get to work. And then you have a lot of time sitting at your desk. Whereas now they wake up and, I might as well get started. And I think the day starts earlier. And then over and above that, they're doing housework at the same time as doing work. So this leads what you mentioned about the different types of stresses. So I think in a 24-hour day, they're doing more now than they ever have. You know, so working from home brings its own type of stress at the same time. It brings more workload. And I think the goal now is to kind of, with that, you're going to be sitting more often. Believe it or not, I think that might be the case. And all the negative effects from that. So with a lot of my clients, what I've been saying is that you're going to find that this is going to be a common thing. So for every hour, just dedicate 50 minutes to sitting, and then take that 10 minutes and stand up and do X amount of mobility drills, whether it's just hip mobility. Let's try to reverse whatever sitting is doing and whatever sitting is taking away. And sitting is taking away from you that glute extension and that back extension, and then that diaphragmatic breathing, and that kind of focusing your eyes on the horizon as opposed to on that, you know, Kindle right in front of your face. So it's, where do we kind of shoot our gaze? Is it going to be a couple of inches from our face, or is it out into the ocean, you know, where you could have those breaks? And I think it's a culmination of a lot of things: sitting more often, you know, shortened vision, rounded posture, you know, the convenience of being at home, and the added stresses that come from that. So there's a lot of interesting things that come up. So definitely for me, it's been a lot of just overall a decrease in conditioning because of the added volume of work and less time. So what, you know, and it's a removal of past structure. So you wake up at this time, you do your gym, you shower, you go to work. Everything is structured and it has its place and in its pattern. COVID comes along. It's like, okay, all of a sudden, I don't have a routine anymore. I have work to do. I have the boxes I need to check. I need to work, I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to drop kids, I need to do whatever. But the sequencing has gone out. So everything is haywire. And we try to coordinate and put everything in their boxes where they were. And we're making up boxes and then we're trying to rewire and redo old patterns, but in a completely different context. And that's where a lot of people fall short. And we tend to drop and dump things that aren't of a priority, or we think aren't a priority. Exercise. Exercise is a luxury, but it's a necessity. You know, we treat exercise as I'll do it when I'm free. So no, you do it all the time. And you know, it's something to always incorporate. So I think a lack of conditioning because of the lack of actually training. People are just stopping to counteract this change of schedule and the increased workload. And then everything that happens from there. And from there, it just cascades down. Well, if you're not training, then you're not strengthening posture. You're not getting cardiovascularly fit. You're not maintaining explosive power. You know, you're not, you know, doing your yoga, your breathing, and you know, anything like that. So I think that's the cause of everything, a lack of structure and trying to adapt to this new, more intense schedule. So yeah, I think that might be the biggest thing I've noticed.
I love, you've spoken about so much. And I'm just like, oh, I want to talk about this and this and this and this. No. I just
sorry, it's a stream of consciousness sometimes.
I love it. I'm just like, that's why I got a pen and paper, because I was just like, and I think, you know, like before I even try and touch on like half of what you were saying, because I completely agree with you, is I think awareness is probably one of the biggest lessons that's going to come out of COVID. And I think it was something we didn't necessarily have before anyways. We almost had like you're talking about, organization, and we had it determined or predetermined for us. You know, so it was, you go to school, you go to work, this is the situation, so it's predetermined for us. And now all of a sudden there's this shift where now we have to have awareness. And I think with awareness, you have to almost understand how the brain functions, right? And you've got to have a little bit of information around like your physiology. How does the body work? How does the brain think about things? And how does your, you know, the difference between thinking and behavior, or emotions and thinking, because we are emotional beings first and then thinking. And, you know, and when I say this, I'm saying this in a sense of we're very much, if the word reactory is a thing, but like we're reaction based first. So if there was a threat, I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder if someone's trying to break into my house. I'm kind of starting to prep myself. I've got fight or flight mode going. I'm getting ready. But like I said before, is that we can't differentiate between the different stresses. So understanding that our brain is first protect, and then it's also function, and not necessarily self-preservation. So our body, and then when pain starts to pop up, so when you've got low back pain because you've got weak glutes because you've been sitting for so long, your brain has really just been going, but I've been working because that's what I need to do, and I've been productive because I've been physically active. And then pain comes, and the first thing we do is go, painkillers, instead of understanding that pain is our body's way of actually communicating with our brain and going, hey, you know, this isn't functioning too well, right? So
of course,
I think, I feel like awareness is definitely, you know, the starting point of this. And then even under that, you know, when we talk about, you know, exercise being a luxury, and it's very similar to chiropractic, and you kind of see you know, people will kind of talk about, people need chiropractic because they're in a lot of pain and there's a lot of benefit that chiropractic can bring, but it will often be the first thing to be sacrificed when there's other things that need to be done.
No, of course. Yeah.
And I think exercise tends to be seen in that way. And I'm like, the reason why our brains aren't necessarily wired to be like, everything must stop, we must exercise, is because when people were in the jungles and in the bush and they didn't have to think, I need to do sit-ups and I need, you know, it's functional movements. You were climbing up trees, you were dropping into caves, you were, you know, upper body strength, lower body strength, core strength, you were running, you were looking for food. So all of those things, you didn't necessarily have to think about scheduling a gym time in, you know, the Amazon jungle.
It was interwoven in your life. It's just what you did. It's what you did. It's not what you do at a moment. Or at my lunchtime, I'm not going to do X, Y, Z. It's just what you did, you know.
Yeah. But I think it brings us back to the style of training that you do, which I'm so excited to keep learning about. That functional approach. It's been a buzzword for years. And whenever you say, like, you know, I do functional training, it's like, well, now you're in a box, you know. So I do bodybuilding, well, that's another box. I do yoga, that's a box. So I think exercise, well, we do physical training. We train physically outside of sitting, and that physical training should look a certain way to optimally complement what the body is meant to do. And then you have little sub-genres of being physical. And I think a subgenre would be bodybuilding or yoga or swimming or cycling or tennis or golf or, you know, martial arts, anything like that. But I think that central hub is, you know, exercise isn't just to make you look a certain way. It's there to make you perform a certain way, you know, and mentally and physically. So you spoke about that psychological stress. Well, if you're not doing anything physical that complements and gets you into a better mental state, that's a weakness, you know, and this is a strength game. You know, no matter what subgenre you want to tap into, it's always about getting stronger. You know, whether you want to lift 500 kilos or run up a hill without stopping or meditate for longer and longer forms of concentration. I think it's all weaknesses on the trajectory to getting strong. You know, I think, and that could encompass any kind of term that you want. You know, strength could mean anything to you that you want. You know, like your ability to touch your toes is a strength that you've now acquired, even though it's a flexible act. It's a strength in like kind of embodiment. You know, so I think we're all in the strength game. How can we get ourselves physically, mentally stronger, which is basically from one point to a higher point. I think that term, I think it's a bit more kind of encompasses everyone. So we can all share exercise and we can all share it the same way. Because you get a lot of people very like, I'm going to do this style of training. Oh no, women do that type of thing and guys only do that type of thing. And like, okay, well, last I saw, we all have arms and legs and a head and breathe air, you know? Yeah.
We all eat the same and we all, you know, poo the same. It's all the same. You know, there's obviously little nuances, but at the end of the day, a push is a push, a pull is a pull, walking, lunging, running. It's all rotation, throwing. We all have to do that. You know, some more than others and some in higher capacities. But if we can share that and then branch out to the specifics afterwards, I think that's a cool place to start. At least in my assessments, that's what we look at. And then we say, okay, we start off general, and then when we have this general approach, how can we now say, okay, this is Aimee's routine, and could branch off and take your kind of attributes, female, you know, certain age, certain lifestyle, certain work habits, certain wants and desires, and then it becomes more specific and nuanced, like a tree. It kind of branches off, and that's your branch, and you sit on, and it kind of flowers into what it wants to be, you know. But that's that type of thing, you know. You have a little violin playing there.
A strong zombie. That's what I want. Not a flower, okay? Not a flower. But I. Yeah.
No, you're saying.
No, I was just I was saying, I think we're in the movement game, you know, and I think from like a chiropractic perspective, I'm into movement too. I think the movement aspect of it with the specific chiropractic adjustment is maybe, yes, it is specific to joints. But what's also kind of popped up for me in the last 2 years has been, okay, so we've got, you know, what we call a subluxation, or, you know, where the joint's not moving properly. But then if you take a step back and start asking the questions as to why are we getting degeneration? Why are we not moving well? Why, you know, and then kind of going, okay, so maybe it's because we're sitting for so long. And then I started asking the question of like, yeah, but like, what is it in our body that's kind of like, why is it happening that if you're sitting in flexion the whole time, if you go into extension, then you hurt yourself? If you know, like what happens? And then you start realizing that our brain doesn't have templates of movement, right? So it's not necessarily that we can all be Tiger Woods and go out and play really great golf. He had, you know, it's a practice, and yes, some people have a, you know, probably a talented or a gift towards certain movements. But in reality, our brain works on input and output, right? So if we're going to start where you're talking about like the functional movement, a lot of us are probably, you know, and you can talk more to this, is like, what are the movements we're inputting more than, you know, that, you know, we're outputting flexion a lot, right? Which I suppose is probably a lot more pushing, I'm assuming. But we're not doing a lot of pulling. And so I've been talking to my patients about flexion extension. And we talk about glute, you know, and that was something that you said, weak glutes. And I mean, I'm testing glutes all the time, because I'm just like, hey, your hamstrings are firing before your glutes when you go into extension. And people don't quite understand. It's like, oh, you know, how this happened. But I think it's really interesting to be like, what are the foundational movements, right? You talk about like, okay, pushing and pulling, and can we start thinking about, okay, today I did a lot of, you know, it's like, what, you know, and so I think it's interesting.
It is cool, you know. There's something I think about, like, how can you get, like, when you say you're talking about pushing and pulling, and a lot of the times I like to start off with a pull, because you nailed it right there. We live in a world where we're kind of pushing, you know, what gravity is kind of pulling you forward, and in essence that's accented by bench pressing or curling, or these muscles that you can see in the mirror. You know, to train any of those, you need to kind of push. So it's pressing, pushing, you know, all these type of these actions, or curling as well. But all those mirror muscles are kind of accented by further sitting. So everything in the back needs a bit of love and attention too. So that's the main thing. And even like another way, if you know, I think it's a time to start attracting things towards you, positive, you know, and not just the weight or the band, but you want to grab someone and pull them towards you. You're so fond of keeping people at arm's length. So
I like that.
It's cool. It has like a bit of like this little romantic side to it. Actually, I wrote an article where it was a short little kind of thing for a magazine, and it was for Valentine's Day. So I decided to say, well, what type of Valentine's Day exercises? So I decided to make it all pulling based. So you're not only just pulling weights towards you and strengthening your posture, but you're taking your attitude from keeping people at arm's length and kind of attracting people and pulling things towards you. So physically and metaphysically and metaphorically and all those type of things. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, now with the smile on my face, I'm definitely a hopeless romantic. I'm like, I love it. I'm gonna read that on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. I'll send you the little thing.
Thank you.
It was cool. It's short little. It was for a magazine. It was short, but I think it was interesting. You know, I think it was cool.
Yeah.
I heard the topic. I'm like, I just wanted to expand on it a bit more, and it just became this whole romantic Cupid workout.
I love it. But you know, when you speak about that, and just like the posture of like opening up and opening ourselves up, And there are studies that talk about that. I think Amy Cuddy spoke about, the power pose where you're really standing. So, and it can actually give you a little bit more confidence.
Yeah.
If you're nervous about something and you're hunched over and you kind of stand in that superwoman power pose, you actually improve certain positive hormones that make you feel more confident. So
of course.
I like that. And I like this opening up for people to come and just, love.
Yeah, I've seen that in, so a lot of times at school, I remember seeing, like there's certain kids at school that were bullied and picked on. And you could see the people that were susceptible to that or have had that happen to them in their posture. They walk around with kind of adrenaline fatigue and everything's kind of, they've been beaten like mentally and physically, and their posture is one of kind of retreat. It's hunched and slouched. So so with that posture, you can see like this person who's been through war and been through hell. How many soldiers, you look at old videos of soldiers going to war and they're tall and proud, they come back and they're dragging themselves, and like that was hell. And you can see that they've just had this shocking experience, and it manifests in their body. So if we can kind of reverse the body's position, will that drag the mind with it? If the mind dragged the body down, will the body drag the mind in reverse? Can we kind of reverse time? And that's the way. So standing up tall with your chest out, just standing that way, tricks the brain into, well, the environment is now ours to conquer as opposed to conquering us. And I think that's that might be quite helpful. I'm reminded of the guy's called the laughing yoga, the laughing yogi in India. I saw it a while ago. They've got like this thousands of people and out in the middle in India, and they just sit there and they just start laughing deliberately. So it comes across as very like ha ha, very forced. And then after a while, it just rolls and rolls, and you have like hundreds of people in hysterics, like actively, like legitimately laughing. And they're sitting there and they're just and they're laughing, and it just becomes this like perpetual motion machine. They're just laughing genuinely. And then the genuine laughter is releasing all those serotonin, those dopamine and those happy, feel-good kind of hormones and chemicals. And then after that session, they leave with the surplus rushing through the body that they can then apply everywhere else. So you got to kind of fake it till you make it. Then when you make it, just maintain it. And that was interesting. The laughing.
I
never forget that.
I was actually, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Wait, what's interesting is like when you talk about shifting memory, when you talk about like neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to change, right? Which is crazy. But one of the things is that we have the capacity to actually change protein branches in our brain that are associated with memory. And so I think it's really interesting to look at. We can't control the stresses around us to 100 degree. Like some things you can definitely choose to remove from your life, and other things you can't. COVID was one of those things that you really couldn't. But really looking at the intention around how you process stress and how you empower your body to deal with the stresses. So whether that is I right now feel like imposter syndrome, standing up straight, and that's not necessarily how I feel, but it does, it plays this role in your head. And then, you look at a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves, so in your subconscious and conscious brain, and you can only restructure the story, and it's not necessarily to change the story and say it didn't happen, but your association with the story changes when you take it from the subconscious into the thinking brain. So it kind of goes back to that process of awareness, right? So even with exercise is, I agree with you that it's not purely just for looking good, right? It's like sometimes you need to exercise just so you can have that release of the serotonin and the dopamine, because you recognize that you're not feeling what the way you should be feeling. And I think that's, I'm always talking about quality of life. And I'm almost wondering if we fully understand what a good quality life looks like,
Yeah. I think the sheer existence of our jobs is tantamount to the fact that something has gone wrong. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's like not to diminish what we do, but like what you do is valuable. But the fact that we have these professions, and even my profession, teaching you how to be active in a world where it used to be automatic. If we go back 2,000 or 5,000 or a million years, and you got to teach cavemen, this is how you lift a rock properly. And I'm like,
right.
What are you talking about? It's like, I'll teach you how to lift a rock properly. There was no allotted time, and then sure, you have as progression comes along, you have your therapies and your medicines, whether it's like roots and vines and healthy ways of eating and sleeping with the sunrise and waking up with rising with the sun and going to bed with the sun, those type of things. Those are kind of wired and built in. But the fact that we need a trainer to simulate an environment from a million years ago and then guide you through that environment, through the different stages, just to teach you how to pseudo hunt and carry animals and that type of thing. It just shows where the whole world has kind of taken a bit of a dip. And we're grateful that these professions have opened up, but it's just an example of, this is only present because of this dip, and there was a gap in the demand to be that way. And for yourself, the reason why the back pains exist, bar being mauled by something big with sharp teeth, sitting too long. It's a lack of this exposure that keeps you kind of grounded in. Remember that old recovery model called RAS, rest and us, and then they switched it to MAS, movement and us. They realized so post-operation, I tore my meniscus a couple of years back. So after surgery, I'm in the room there, and as I came to, as I woke up in the room, boom, we're moving your knee. And it's like, you would think that, well, I need to rest it a bit until inflammation comes. And I says, no, we need to immediately create a bit of in control and pain-free, of course, but we need stimulation of movement as soon as possible. Of course, all operations are different. You would need rest, but the sheer shift into movement as soon as possible, to some degree, and to some operations, I saw, it's like, wow, this is very cool. We're now promoting movement and not rest, because inactivity is more harmful than a lot of overactivity, I suppose. So I think that's...
Well, I'm seeing that with back pain, right? Because that was the big thing with back pain, was once you had back pain, you just went and you laid in your bed and you didn't move, and and then that was the thing. And now it's different, because we're talking about movement, we're talking about strength training, we're talking, and the reason being is, like, even when I look at degeneration, and obviously not one story fits all, but oftentimes, you look at, with degeneration, and you've got extra bone growth around the vertebral joints or around the other joints. And I'm often saying to people that it's not people talk about old age, but you're seeing degeneration in people younger and younger and younger.
Yeah.
And what it is a matter of stability, right? Is bone is laid down where it's needed, because it needs more stability. And so surface area, if you want to call it that, which is inherently for stability. And so I think it's just really interesting, because even then, in terms of treatment protocol for back pain, is I can look at someone whose x-rays will show hectic degeneration and they'll have no pain. And you'll have someone who has very minimal degeneration and has pain, right? Yeah. And so, but then you can have vice versa, or the same way. It's like there's lots of degeneration, lots of pain. And one of the things I'm constantly saying to patients is, how can we get your movement going? And so it's really great that, like, I think from the get-go, we're talking about movement, whether it's from chiropractic to physiotherapy to, what you do, to biokinesis, whatever it is in transmission, we're all talking about movement, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just key where I'm saying to people, I think it's always important to make sure you have a trainer, especially in the beginning, because you want someone to be there to watch how you're performing. You want someone to be able to identify, hey, maybe the crunches you're doing are not the right ones to be doing right now because you're doing a lot more movement from your neck than you're doing it from your core.
Yeah.
So I love like YouTube, and I think that when you fully understand how your body moves, and then you can kind of go, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube class on my own, or then on my off days I'll exercise on my own. But I think it's important to have a trainer, so that you can get that help with the
of course,
right?
How do you now for yourself? If like pain is quite subjective to the individual. I know some people that can take a lot of pain, and some people are so sensitive, like you blow in their face and they. If you're treating someone and you say, give me your level of pain, when you hurt yourself, how's this feel? Out of a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And I think a treatment being based off of the severity that the pain is at times. How do you have a certain way of kind of navigating people's subjective perception of pain? Like you ask someone, how's that feel? That's a 2. Meanwhile, their bone's sticking out the arm, and that's a 10. But they perceive it as such. So they give you information relative to the way they just perceive it, which might be an all-time low, where you're looking for treatment that would match something that is high. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So pain is really interesting. I've been doing a lot of reading around it because pain is all about perception. Like it's basically your brain processing pain, right? And then it's what's also really interesting is that now we're looking at the fact that you don't necessarily have to have damage. And I think that's really interesting, because then you can also have someone like you're saying who has maybe something physically really you're like, oh, that really should be painful, how are you functioning? And then somehow psychologically they've just got a really high pain tolerance, and so they just keep moving. And oftentimes those are the people that will tell you, I've hurt myself, and if I had just listened to my body a little bit earlier, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in at this point.
A level of stubbornness as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And if I'm being honest and vulnerable, I'm that person that can, I think there's just this thing that's like, just keep going, keep doing. And last year I started, really resting and learning to be better with that. But I think what typically happens is I find with different disorders, the pain sensitivity is very different. So if I'm looking at like someone that comes in with a disc issue, what's interesting is that we can, pain-wise, they can come in at like, they can be like, I'm at an 8, but my neurosurgeon has said that I don't qualify for surgery. So then they come in and they have like a lot of pain, they're struggling to functionally walk and stuff. And so we do some treatment, but I also really work on their own awareness around pain.
Sure.
Because pain decrease is the ultimate goal, then we'll just kind of get back to the problem in the first place, because that's not the goal. The goal is functionality. The goal is healing. The goal is, like I said to you, stability. The goal. So oftentimes then I'll have someone who will say, this isn't working because my pain is still at an 8. And then I've got to go, but you're sleeping better, but you're walking an extra K, but you're, so you have to look at the difference between the pain processing and then the functionality. And what I say in terms of my treatment is, and I guess what I've learned from my own personal thing is I've separated myself as a clinician from chiropractic.
Okay.
So the idea when I talk to my patients is, hey, as a clinician, I want what's best for you. And so these are the available options. This is the information I know. This is the person that I can send you to who has more information about so and so and so. In terms of chiropractic, the research behind chiropractic and lower back pain is this and this and this. The research behind chiropractic, dry needling and rehab and your back pain is this and this and this. Within my first treatment and my second treatment, what I'm looking to see is, can I stimulate some level of change?
Yeah.
So it may not necessarily be pain decrease, because sometimes there's a pain increase.
Sure.
Right, by the time the second visit comes, but then I'm having some level of functional change. But even then I say to them, if I can increase your pain or, pain perception, or decrease your pain perception, I know I'm doing something, right? And what we're trying to do is pinpoint what the exact problem is. If we have nothing happen, and then I'm going, okay, so we need to refer you to right? Because this chiropractic can't help you here.
Sure.
And then, people will be like, oh my gosh, but you're causing pain. And I'm going, well, here's the thing, is that the brain is interesting when it comes to pain. If you're at a 7 and you've been at a 7 for a really long time, your brain basically starts to diminish the perception of pain. Yes. So you can come in and be like, I'm at a 5, when in fact you're actually at a 7, but because your brain wants to keep functioning and keep going, right? It diminishes the pain perception, so you don't think you're as bad as you actually are. So we start treatment. Yeah, we start treatment, and then all of a sudden you're going, this is crazy. Like, this is where I'm at, and I'm going, okay, there is this possibility that your brain, in this case, is just really trying to,
that's so
and then, so pain. Oh, we could talk about pain because it's interesting. It's
Is that similar to like that phantom limb type syndrome? For example, my dad was a amputee, double amputee, and he always spoke about being able to feel his toes. So you have those neural pathways that have been from the brain, down the spine, down the leg, to the toes, return, all those type of things for 40 years, 50 years, Then you chop the leg off, but the wiring is still sending the signals. That pattern and that habit after decades is still going through the same ghost walking through a wall pathway, regardless if there's a limb there or not. And then, and often he would mention, like you said, oh, my toes are cramping up. Got the toes, but his feet are cramping. So it was such a, when he mentioned, it's like, that's fascinating, and that the brain still keeps pushing you forward. So I think also in a fight or flight, you get shot or bitten or more or whatever, you can still get up and run. Adrenaline is charging you, getting you to points of safety. And that you can see in the small doses, as you mentioned now, where, okay, we can't keep you operating at this level, but we need to get you moving. We need to get you out of danger, or you're going to die. You have two options. You're at a crossroad. You can go this way or this way. We can help you by diminishing the pain. It doesn't change the symptom. It doesn't change the severity of your status or your injury, but your perception will allow you to get out of way, and we can deal with it later. And I think people are always kind of push, deal with it later. Push, deal with it later, deal with it later, deal with it later. So they keep pushing the treatment further and further and further until such point where the brain says, listen, we've diminished the pain to a point. Our back's against the wall. We can't diminish it anymore because you're not doing anything about it. And there's a catastrophic breakdown. So there's a giant breakdown. And I think that's where we need to kind of intervene. Excuse me.
Which is interesting, because when you talk, I think when you talk about that, right, it's like, so brain, we said brain, and we spoke about functioning. So let's keep moving. Let's keep, so functioning, whether that's, keep working or, and then the other thing is protect. So that's the idea that you can have pain even when there's no damage. So pain is a study in science. I don't think we fully understand pain because it's really complex, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that idea that like it's you've got chronic inflammation, you've got inflammation, but then you've also got things like your brain actually just perceiving pain even when there's no actual damage or danger. So you'll have someone with back pain that will say the aircon causes pain. And it's like, well, it's like just sitting next to an aircon and it gives me back pain. Well, it's not necessarily true that the aircon is causing back pain, but it's just that maybe the nociceptive fibers in that area are just so sensitive that, they start firing, they're firing pain. So maybe there's no necessarily like damage, or there was previous damage and now your nerves haven't healed properly. And so now, you've just got misfiring. And so it's really interesting, just like how our bodies work. And this is why, kind of going back to what I said before, is I think we all, have to have a basic knowledge of how our brain functions, how our bodies function, so brain in terms of like anatomically, physiologically, but also from an emotional perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a neuroscience perspective. Because now with all of the research that's popping up, we're starting to realize we actually have more power to change systems in our physiology. I mean, we're talking about things like epigenetics, where you're talking about changing DNA expression through food. Like, this is crazy,
Gut health. Yeah, you can change your when you change your gut bacteria, you change your depression or your level of anxiety. So brain function directly linked to the active cultures in your gut. It's crazy.
Oh, man, no, it is. I think we can go
No,
on about
episode 2.
Yeah, I know.
But it's interesting you say, like, even with like an air conditioning, how many unacknowledged underlying symptoms are you going through that a stiff breeze tips you over? Because essentially all it is, you're laying in bed and the fan's blowing or the aircon's blowing and you wake up, I'm stiff and sore. It's like a stiff breeze got you to that point. So how strung up and how tightly wound were you where simple exposure to a couple puffs of wind over the course of a night tip you over to a breaking point? We're like, I need painkillers. I need to reach for the medicine cabinet. It's good to have, but not good to keep relying on, So I think with what you guys are doing it's amazing to kind of get to the subtle nuances. Like I mentioned before, I take people that are healthy-ish or want to get healthier and we just hammer at them. But you guys are the surgeons or the scalpels or like, let's find the underlying things, which is extremely valuable, I think that the two marry together very well.
I think so. Yeah, 100%. And we're improving the quality of our, of our patients and communities' lives, right? And that's the point of all of this, is, because I think sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, why am I doing this, right? Because it's never really been a job, it's never been something that's like, I'm doing this, it was always like there had to be a bigger purpose to it. And I think just from someone who's, I guess, has struggled with, chronic pain, which is hilarious because, of what I do. I think just that little bit, when you have a little bit more knowledge on how you can improve the quality of your life, like that it changes things, because now you can play with your kids, now you can take a walk with your family, you can, and you can move, you can feel better, you can be a better friend, you're not depressed. So now you want to be in society and you want to have community around you. And so it's this cascade of like the positive that just keeps, and it's like just a little bit that you can do to make your life, a little bit better. Then I'm like, cool, and sometimes it does look like just, my pain's decreased. And I'm like, okay, even though that's not the goal, but I'm like, hey, maybe that is just the little bit that you needed to just kind of make your life a little bit better, you know.
I love it. That's beautiful. Aimee, that's awesome. We just did an hour.
Okay.
And I think with what you said there is perfect to kind of to wrap that up with. That's awesome, you know. It's all that meta perspective, and yeah, that's very, very cool. I like that.
Okay, awesome.
It's been amazing. I'd love to do this again. So we definitely have another one. In fact, we can do a little sign off now.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll chat again. We'll chat again soon.
Okay, awesome.
Thank
you.